This is Hemant Mehta on the right and Jonathan Shelley on the left. Hemant Mehta is an atheist, friendlyatheist.com. And on the left is Jonathan Shelley. Jonathan Shelley is a member of the NIFB. Put it that way. It's an extremist group, a cult. They advocate for violent action against people that they don't like. And that includes like gay people, for example. If you're gay, then you have no place in society except for 6 feet under, quote unquote. That's what, they've said here. Tommy McMurtry, another NIFB preacher.
We know there have always been homos. We know they have always been around. We've read the book of Genesis, okay? Nobody's saying they're never around, but there was a time when society, when our country saw them for what they were and they put them in their place 6 feet under.
So that's the type of person we're dealing with on this. This isn't part one. If you didn't see the others, don't sweat it. This stands independently of the rest. I'll give context if it's missing. And while we listen to these nutter butters spread nutter buttery all over everything, we're going to play some Breath of the Wild 2, Tears of the Kingdom. Should just be in the background. Won't bother you too much. You never played before. Leading up to this moment in the conversation, Jonathan Shelley and I think the other guy's name is Aaron Thompson. They were talking about how the Holocaust was not like really 6 million people that died in it. And Sandy Hook, the attack on the school, that wasn't really, however, meant 20 kids or whatever. It was fake or whatever. And they're saying that everyone should do their own research. And Hemant Mehta is saying, no, you should trust experts when they do this research, when they publish studies. Historians understand all of this stuff. Historians know how many people died in those death camps. It isn't like just, whatever anybody thinks, just throw a number out there and maybe that's it. It's not like that. It's a factual claim. Either 6 million people died, roughly, or they didn't. And these people have no way of knowing how many people died. They have no clue. But Jonathan Shelley and Aaron Thompson or whatever, they're going to claim that they can know better than an expert anyway. Just insane and ridiculous and sad. All right, so let's continue listening from this point forward and see what they have to say here. Oh, yeah, they also, leading up to this, they also questioned the efficacy of vaccines. They said that there are litter boxes in classrooms, the whole 9 yards.
To me, it doesn't really matter what the number is specifically. To me, the fact that I can't even question anything about it underlies the idea
you can question the numbers,
that there could be something fallacious about this
but
particular
this is the same problem as the Sandy Hook thing, where it's like, if you don't trust the numbers that were given by people who studied this stuff, they didn't pull 6 million out of thin air. They didn't pull the number of Sandy Hook victims out of thin air. Like
they like number 6, though.
They like the number 6, he says. He's saying that this is like demonic, I guess, right? Get a grip on reality, bro. This is crazy.
What is that?
I do like the number 6 and 6 million.
Oh, my God.
I love Hemant. Oh, my God. That's funny.
They're not pulling it out of their ass, though. So, they're getting it from somewhere, and I don't get where you are like, I'm pretty sure those experts don't know what they're talking about.
But why does it matter?
Well,
why would it matter to you?
Because
you can't even buy on the internet that
expertise.
Have numbers in them.
You're undermining expertise. This goes back to the vaccine thing. This goes to the historian thing with the Holocaust, which is there are people who dedicate their lives to studying this stuff. And I think the message you are sending your congregations is, it doesn't matter. They don't know anything.
I don't really preach about the Holocaust very often.
Well, I don't know about him if he preaches about it very often, but the other dude here preaches about it from time to time. As Steven Anderson has preached about it. In fact, Steven Anderson, the founder of the NIFB, created a documentary about how the Holocaust is secretly fake and it was fabricated by these people who are trying to blah, 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 you know how these people are. Anyway, they talk about it plenty. So I don't want to hear any of this BS. Oh, we never talk about it. It happens.
I have mentioned it. I just say you do your study for yourself because I don't really think that's necessary. But I don't think that that's necessarily something that I should be preaching about as far.
Yeah, exactly. Don't do your study for yourself either. You aren't a historian.
As doctrine, because it's not doctrine.
Okay.
But if they're interested in that, then that's up to them to study that. I recommend, that they just try to find a book if you can, but it's against the law in most countries to even question the Holocaust.
No, okay. God, this dude is so obsessed with persecution, isn't he? If you want to question the Holocaust, as in question how it happened and how many people died and everything, you are perfectly free to do that. Nobody is stopping you anywhere. It's when you start denying it that it's a problem. You want to understand how they got to 6 million? Fine. There's information out there to help you figure it out. There are historians that'll explain it to you, sit you down and talk you through it. That's not what he's trying to do. He wants to deny it. He doesn't want to talk to a historian because he doesn't trust historians. These people are jokes. I'm sorry, man. They're jokes.
Holocaust. That's pretty weird that
it happened.
If you doubt the numbers, you can go to prison for them.
They're just complete nonsense. Quick interjection, this won't take long, I promise. I'd appreciate it if you watched to the end of the video, or at least a couple extra seconds, because YouTube bases its algorithm off of watch time. The more watch time a video has, the further the video will go. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I'm selling my book, Understanding Jehovah's Witnesses, 400 pages, and my second book, 100 Questions for Jehovah's Witnesses, which is about 80 pages. And you can find them both there on the website. Audio form, ebook form, whatever. It's about my experiences within the religion and the history of the religion generally. The 100 questions are intended to challenge your religious leader, so I'd appreciate it if you give it a read. Okay, back to the video. All right, Germany's laws on hate speech, Nazi propaganda, and Holocaust denial. This is on pbs.org. Pretty trustworthy. A troubled history is alive in Germany, both in a resurgence of far-right ideology and new changes to the laws designed to combat that extremism. The Frontline documentary Germany's oh my God, leave me alone. Germany's neo-Nazis and the far-right tracks the recent growth of far-right violence in the country, investigating how neo-Nazi groups are using internet platforms to recruit and organize. To address the resurgence, German authorities look to a system of hate speech laws passed by the Bundestag, Germany's federal legislature, over the 76 years since Adolf Hitler was defeated, and that are still evolving today. German Penal Code prohibits publicly denying the Holocaust and disseminating Nazi propaganda, both off and online. This includes sharing images such as swastikas, wearing an SS uniform, and making statements in support of Hitler. So you can question it, you can't deny it. Different things. You can ask, how did you get there? Why do you say there are 6 million? But you can't deny that it happened. You can't deny that it's 6 million. Outright say, no, it isn't. That's a lie, or whatever. As far as I can tell, that's the law. All right, let's continue listening to these nutter butters.
If you say it didn't happen, it's that you can think it, but if you say it out loud, you go to prison for that. Like, it's pretty weird that you have to make a law.
Yeah, so he doesn't like free speech laws in in Germany or in Europe generally. He keeps trying to conflate denying it, saying it doesn't happen, and spreading Nazi propaganda with simply trying to understand exactly what happened. They're different. That's not how it went. That's not how anything works.
Think it, but if you say it out loud, you go to prison for that. Like, it's pretty weird that you have to make a law, to say that something happened. Like, what other
yeah, I mean, what if it was
not a law here,
what if it was 6.5 million?
They're trying to make it
like,
one,
why can't we just investigate it
See, I get that's not a problem. You can investigate it. You're perfectly free to.
and see all the information?
Because the people who study it for their lives have studied it.
I think that there's a clear
is it against
ulterior
law?
motive there.
It's
And
not
so,
a law here, though.
Oh, give me a break, dude. There's an ulterior motive? What's the ulterior motive? Actually, I mean, I know what these people claim the ulterior motive is, in all seriousness. Because, as I said earlier, Steven Anderson made a whole video about the Holocaust, and it was brutal, dude. Oh, my God. This is from 2015. He released this video.
You say, well, what's the motive to lie about the Holocaust, Pastor Anderson? Well, here's the motive. Because without the Holocaust, there would be no nation of Israel. We can see the motive to lie about it because the whole justification for going in and creating the modern-day nation of Israel, which is completely satanic, and it was something
God, he's got a movie called Marching to Zion. Absolutely insane.
that Rothschild was behind, and the United Nations and the world government, etc., all proven in this film, Marching to Zion.
Proven, he says, quote unquote, proven.
The motive's clear to lie about it.
Anyway, yeah, that's Steven Anderson, and that's his position on the Holocaust and why it's fake. Just insane, dude.
No, like, Germany has a different
Yeah,
set.
of
I'm not
course,
defending
sure.
or not defending. I don't know it. But, like, different...
Do you believe in free speech?
Yeah.
Like, do you think that we should be silenced for our viewpoints?
You're not silenced.
But do you believe we should be?
No. You could say what you want. I do think private
But are you
companies,
excited like when YouTube cancels us or deletes our channels or nukes us?
That's not free speech, first of all.
I do think I agree with Hemant Mehta wholeheartedly in this, as far as I can tell, with what he thinks about free speech and everything. These people should be allowed to have an opinion on anything. They should be allowed to express their opinion on anything without being jailed, pretty much. But they don't have a right to a platform. So YouTube is perfectly free to kick them off, and I think that they should, too. I think YouTube has a moral obligation to kick these people off. So, anyway, no jail time, but they don't have a right to a platform. Just like I can't go to their church and demand that they let me speak at their lectern because free speech, it doesn't work that way. In that same vein, they can't demand a platform on YouTube's, systems.
The YouTube thing, I did have this, by the way, to talk about, but the YouTube thing, they're a private company. They have their rules in place. You guys have broken those rules, not just you two, other new IFB preachers as well. They've broken those rules on purpose, like sometimes flaunting it, then setting up sock puppet accounts to post other videos of your sermons as well. So the fact that YouTube says, okay, you can't be on here anymore, that's not suppressing your free speech. The fact that we're doing this live stream right now on a site that has
I think it's Rumble.
no policies about hate speech or anything like that.
I think that they do. They're just not.
No, Rumble's hate speech policies, I'm assuming it's on Rumble. Their hate speech policy is you cannot wish death upon other people specifically and explicitly because that's illegal in the United States, actually. In fact, as far as I know, that's illegal everywhere in the world to call for the death of somebody else. I want this person to die, for example. Quick interjection. This won't take long, I promise. I just want to say I'd appreciate it if you check my Patreon. OwenMorgan.com/Patreon to find it. YouTube's algorithm goes up and down, so I can never predict where it's going to be. Having patrons gives me some level of stability. Okay, back to the video.
Having arbitrary definitions.
There's a couple.
But I'm just saying,
but
like
you know
if you were in charge of YouTube, though,
Yeah.
would you agree with that? Like, would
With-
you want us to be off of the platform? Is
Yes.
kind of my question.
Yeah.
Well, then they're silencing free speech.
No, you have free speech. No one's arresting you for the thing.
There's a difference between free speech and freedom of expression. You're free to express yourself however you want, and other companies are free to express themselves however they want. Free speech is the protection against jail time for things that you say. The United States has pretty much absolute protection for free speech, just about. Unless you're telling a hitman, I want you to go kill this person and I will give you this amount of money for it. That's not protected under free speech, for example. But freedom of expression is not the same.
Things you are saying.
So the woman in Oregon that got her business taken away and fined $150,000, Sweet Cakes by Melissa, because she wouldn't, make some queers a wedding cake or whatever.
I looked into that, actually. In fact, I'm coming to find that we're a little bit back from where we were, so we've listened to some of this, but this woman simply had a cake on the shelf. So the primary argument in these cases, should a baker be forced to bake a cake for a gay couple? The primary argument is a baker is basically an expression of like an artistic, what's the word? Oh my God, it's on the tip of my tongue here. A baker expresses their artistic nature through baking cakes, basically. And you can't force somebody to express themselves artistically. That was the original argument, except this woman, Melissa, took it a step further and didn't leave it at, I don't want to bake a cake for this person. She said, I don't want to sell them a cake that's already baked and sitting on the shelf. That's why she was fined some amount of money, because sexual identity, sexual orientation, gender, I don't even know, whatever other things, race, religion, so on and so forth. Those are protected classes. You can't just come in and take somebody's rights away to be served simply because they are this race or this whatever. That's the law that ended segregation effectively. So anyway, this woman, Melissa, was trying to segregate people. She's trying to create a segregated society again. And that law that fined her is protecting society from being segregated again.
Do you think that it was right to do that?
need to remember which specific case that
So
was.
she
My
refused to make
understanding,
a wedding cake for
my
them.
understanding
No, she didn't refuse to make a wedding cake. She refused to sell an already made cake.
is if you are selling a cake and you're saying, I'm selling this cake, let's say it's $20 or whatever, you cannot, according to Oregon law, say, well, if someone comes in, for example, who's black and says, I want to buy that cake, and you say, I'm not going to sell it to you, well, that's obviously racial discrimination. And if a gay person comes in and says, I want to buy this wedding cake that you are selling and I'm going to pay you for it and stuff, yeah, saying that, no, I'm not going to sell it to you specifically because I know what you're going to use it for, yeah, that's discrimination on sexual orientation. I believe that's the thing she did that they
Yeah, that's correct. We looked it up.
Yeah, but
find her
don't
for.
can't somebody that sells guns think that someone's being suspicious and refuse to sell them the gun because they're worried what they're going to do with that?
Yeah, buying a gun is not a protected class. So I don't even know what he's trying to prove with this.
I'm not dodging the question. I don't know what the law is
Well,
regarding
if their
that.
religion, prohibits that practice or they don't believe that that's right, don't they have the right to refuse service just like YouTube?
No, they don't. Just like it doesn't matter if you believe that you have to sacrifice a child on an altar at noon every single day. The child must be 12 years old in 3 days or whatever. You are not legally allowed to do that. It doesn't matter how fervently you believe this as a religious person. What matters is that you're violating somebody else's rights. Your rights end where my rights begin. That's the bottom line. And in the case of like sacrificing a child on an altar, or in a case of denying somebody service, either way, it doesn't matter. You're not allowed to do that simply because you have this religious belief. You can't discriminate against people. You can't take people's rights away. Your rights end where my rights begin.
Practice or they don't believe that that's right, don't they have the right to refuse service just like YouTube has the right? You're saying YouTube has the right to refuse service
YouTube
to
is
the
a private
speech that they don't
company.
like.
If you're
Yeah, but they're not allowed to discriminate based on religion. So they can't ban Christians. They can ban people for saying absolutely insane shit. Like, I want this person dead. That's not a protected class, wanting somebody dead. But Christianity, that is a protected class. That's not what they're doing here, obviously. This is just like an argument from a guy that doesn't understand the first thing about the law.
But that lady was a
stuff-
private company, so like it's
YouTube's,
funny how that
YouTube's
doesn't
selling
work.
ads and they're selling views. So in a sense, like why can't I have my viewpoint on YouTube?
You're not owed YouTube space.
But is that person owed a cake from this particular?
Just like in this guy's case, as I said earlier, Jonathan Shelley, this NIFB preacher, he's not legally obligated to give me a platform. I'm not allowed to simply walk into his church and start talking from his lectern simply because I want to and because he has to platform me or whatever. That's not how this works. That's what he's arguing here. That's like the situation he's portraying. And it's just like nonsense. This is an argument from somebody who not only doesn't understand the law, but doesn't understand the fundamental building blocks upon which the law was built. Doesn't understand like the basics of the philosophies that built the United States and built society more generally. It's not just the United States. It's the world that operates this way by and large. He doesn't seem to understand anything. Or he does understand it, and he's trying to weasel his way back onto YouTube. I'm not sure which. He probably doesn't understand it, right?
Bakery?
If the company is selling the product and you go in and you
YouTube's
wanna
selling
buy
the
it,
product of ads. They sell ads on videos. And in fact, right now it's on all videos virtually.
Again, if YouTube was discriminating against Christians, then it would be a different situation. They're not.
I don't think that unless you have a subscription, ads are being
Right.
put on every single video.
I don't get the idea that if a private company says you violated our rules. By the way, if you weren't violating their rules, you could be on their platform. Like that's
Yeah, well,
the
they
issue.
change the rules every single week, obviously.
And everyone on YouTube knows it. And believe me, everyone's frustrated because we never know what the lines are. But
I don't know. Actually, I think YouTube is really, really, really good about their rules, honestly. I was only on YouTube for many years, And then I started kind of branching out, got on TikTok and, all these other places, Facebook and Twitter too. This happened on Twitter. And I came to find that YouTube is so lax with their rules compared to these other places. Like TikTok will take anything down at like the drop of a hat for absolutely no reason at all. It's crazy. And I can put anything on YouTube. I may not be able to monetize it, but I don't have a right to be monetized on YouTube. I can at least put it up there. So I have very few complaints about YouTube at this point, honestly. They've gone through various adpocalypse moments in their history, and they've gone through times where they were super, super strict, unnecessarily so, and super lax and so on. And right now they're in a really good spot, I think, YouTube is.
Very clearly, if they're saying you can't say the following things and they put it out there and you violate
they're just taking quotes from Pastor Minna's sermon and then putting them as their community guidelines.
That is not what happened.
Specifically. That seems pretty targeted.
Yeah.
It's a general.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's targeted. They're not targeting somebody based on their religion. That's the difference. They're targeting somebody, even though they didn't do that. They're targeting a type of speech.
Rule that applies. But again, if they say you can't have the things because you're violating our guidelines, that is not free speech.
They didn't violate their guidelines. They made up new guidelines after the fact, and then they retroactively enforce them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't know if that's true, but so what? It's their platform. They can do whatever they want. Just like if I'm standing up on your lectern giving a speech about how much I love Jesus, and then I switch to saying, boy, do I hate Jesus. You didn't have that rule previously that people can't get up there and say, boy, do I hate Jesus. But you can retroactively create that rule and apply it to my situation at any time. He's like looking at this through such a ridiculous skewed lens.
So that's targeting. That's targeting specific speech.
Hate speech was still.
And for viewpoints.
What is hate speech?
Oh my God. Hate speech. You are specifically saying something awful because of someone's.
What's something that's
immutable-
awful?
Oh my God. I'm not a lawyer here. You're asking me something that's not my expertise, but I'm saying like if you're.
But you can't even define hate speech, and then
I cannot define hate speech, and actually I can define hate speech, and Hemant Mehta could define it too, but he's playing this game that's played commonly with others, like, what is an apple? It's a fruit that has a thin red skin and a stem on top, but there are green apples. So it's a fruit that has a skin on the outside. Well, that could apply to like oranges or pears or peaches or anything, right? He's trying to make it difficult to identify any single thing. I mean, you can play this game until the end of time. Like, they do this with, when I say they, I'm talking about like the NIFB and the people that I cover generally. They do this with what is a woman also. As if, it's completely, as if our definitions on, in the mainstream world are ambiguous and theirs are hard line. Like they have an exact, precise definition. Everything is difficult to define. That's just like the nature of defining things. We draw arbitrary lines. It's called a bright line rule. That's how it's always worked. So anyway, there are people who have defined hate speech. And either way, hate speech isn't like legally banned. Like you're allowed to use hate speech to your heart's content and not go to jail for it or anything. You just can't. You just have to follow other platforms' rules if you want to stay on their platform. Like, get over yourself, people. Jesus.
You think we should throw people off of a platform because of it?
No, the company can set the agenda for what their rules are. I'm not necessarily defending YouTube because I think they go too far in certain areas.
But do you think
I don't think so. Not anymore. They used to, but no, I think they're legit now. YouTube is.
that YouTube's become a public utility? Because what
it's
if
not though? I mean, we can argue. We can make the case the internet's public
Well,
utility.
they put all kinds of filth on YouTube, and that's allowed to be on there. But
and that's a fair.
but
that's a
then
fair
they just
rebuttal.
but ours is hate speech when they're just like blaspheming.
But Google's pretty much
Christians.
the main search engine.
I know, but it's
and
not free
YouTube
speech.
and Google are hand in hand.
It's a monopoly.
And it's almost like
Okay,
saying
different conversation though.
Yeah, but what about a phone? What if I said something on a phone conversation and they
Okay, now he's making an argument that he's heard elsewhere. This argument is really common in the free speech kind of realm because there was an act, I think, passed in the 1960s maybe, where where telephones could not be, you couldn't have your service removed. AT&T or whoever couldn't ban you from owning a phone because you said something negative about their company, for example. It's a public utility and they must provide service to everybody, and it doesn't matter nothing. It doesn't matter, period. Doesn't matter what you say or you do or whatever. You have a right to a public utility. You have a right to have an account with the water company, with the electric company. They cannot deny you service simply because they don't like the things that you've said about them or whatever. I mean, they can still kick you off if you do something. Like if you don't pay your water bill, for example, they can still kick you off. But they're obligated to provide service to you no matter what. That's the result of a bill. Oh my God, what was the name of the bill now? I'm trying to remember. Somebody remember the name of this bill? I don't remember it. Anyway, I would argue that the internet is a public utility, but YouTube is not. YouTube is just a platform that's being utilized on a public utility. Like having having phone service is a utility. It's a legal right for anybody, but having access to a party line on that phone service, I don't know if you guys remember what party lines are, is not a legal right. That's what he's trying to argue right now, that it's a legal right to have access to a party line or to have access to YouTube or whatever. It's just not how it works, and it shouldn't work that way either. Again, I come back to the same argument. He's not obligated to let me talk about hating Jesus or something, whatever, from his lectern. He can allow anybody on his lectern that he wants to, or deny anybody he wants.
AT&T says you can't have cell phone service, or
I
Sprint,
believe it's
or
different
T-Mobile.
because phones are public utilities.
Yeah, but
again,
why are they a public utility? It's because there's a handful of people that control all the power. It's not one company.
I don't know. I don't think that's the reason why, but okay.
It's a handful of companies, but they control the entire marketplace.
But we're confused.
That's called an artificial monopoly, or is that an oligopoly? Yeah, state of limited competition in which a market is shared by a small number of producers or sellers. Yeah, that's an oligopoly is what that's called. And that's not why, actually. But okay, whatever.
Not
two different
YouTube
things. Free
control
speech.
the marketplace?
If we want to criticize YouTube, there's no shortage of things we could talk about, because I have criticisms of YouTube as well. But it's not a free speech issue if they say these people have violated our guidelines, even though they are always changing, so they can't be on our platform. And by the way, they don't just say, like, they don't go from 0 to you're banned. They have their strike policies.
I never got that. I never went through that policy.
Yeah, I don't believe him. I'm sorry. I just don't. YouTube has a set of things that they do before completely banning you. Always have 3 strikes. And they've changed it throughout the years by adding a warning, and then they've given you the ability to have the warning removed if you follow this set of steps or whatever. They've always had different options, but they've always had options is the point. They've always had this strike policy, just to one degree or another.
You definitely went
No,
through their policies.
they gave me no strikes and would just delete my channel.
Yep.
I just don't believe him.
Which one?
And not that it matters. They're free to do whatever they want.
The sock puppet accounts or like the new ones?
The original ones, all of them. Virtually every single account that I have.
Pastor Menez and Pastor Mejia, they just
I never
nuked
went
them
through
off
the official
channel with
3-strike policy.
No strikes.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do have a couple other things. So
Can we ask a few questions
will
too?
ask.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right.
You absolutely can. Have any of the pastors in the new IFB said stuff where you felt went too far?
And any issue, or just
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, of course, we don't agree with each other on things because we're independent. So, like, there's going to be times when we disagree on minor doctrines or certain statements. And of course, sometimes we wish that maybe we worded things differently. There's times where I listen to my own sermon and I wish that I had worded things differently.
So by and large, he agrees with everything that every other NIFB preacher says. That's the bottom line, right?
Or maybe express myself better. So I think that's inevitable. But generally speaking, like, I don't have a problem with any of my friends, and I think that they're doing a great job, generally speaking. But, you know,
When Jimenez, for example, said what he said, what was his comment in reference
Was I
to?
sad that, 49,
That was
50
false.
homos got, yeah.
So he made a comment about he was celebrating the Pulse Massacre.
Well, he
or
didn't
something.
celebrate it, but he said, am I sad? No.
Okay, I don't know if he said he celebrated or what, but, the Pulse nightclub thing, if you're coming in and this is like your first part, let me just clarify. The Pulse nightclub attack was like this big attack on a gay nightclub, and a bunch of people died. And the NIFB preachers, these guys here, celebrated it. They can pretend all they want that they didn't celebrate it, but they celebrated it. I say they celebrated it because they held a conference on the anniversary of the attack called the Make America Straight Again Conference. If that's not celebrating it, I don't know what is. You can say you don't all you want. That's just nonsense, and everybody knows it's nonsense.
Oh, I'm not sad.
I mean, here's the thing. I literally put it in a documentary. So, you know, it's going to be hard for you to say that I didn't agree with it.
No, so I know you agreed with that one, but I'm saying in general, if they say something like that, do you ever feel like those types of comments that your colleagues might say ever go too far?
It's possible. I don't know of one. If they went a little, like, let's say they're in a kind of a gray area, I'm just going to side with them because I think they're doing the Lord's work, and I want to be supportive of them, generally speaking. If they genuinely crossed a real clear boundary line,
what would the boundary line be for these guys? There is no too far right for these guys. But if you think about it, there is something these people could say that would get them excised from the community. Matter of fact, Trump said he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, he wouldn't lose any voters. There is something he could do to lose voters, actually. You know what it would be? Come out as trans or gay. These people pretend that they don't engage in cancel culture, but they do. And there isn't a cancel culture type of thing anyway. People support things they like and don't support things they don't like. It's how it's always worked. There is no like unique cancel culture that didn't exist like 50 years ago that does today. Just nonsense. Anyway, there is no too far right for these guys, I think, is the point. But there's most definitely too far left.
it's inappropriate. Then if personally asked, I'd probably just give the right answer. But I don't want to necessarily attack them. Like I wouldn't
How do
necessarily
you
go out of my
criticize
way.
each other?
Well, sometimes we call each other and talk. Sometimes we criticize each other in a sense like we preach differently, but maybe not call each other out to like draw direct
Yeah, if we
attention.
disagree, like maybe on an interpretation of a passage or something, like when we get to that passage, it's not like we go after each other on purpose or something, but like if we get to that passage, then, you know, we'll just preach it how we preach it, and we know maybe how other people interpret that passage, but usually it's just a minor thing. It's not some major doctrinal difference. It's maybe just an interpretation of a different passage.
That makes sense. Is divorce okay in your view?
I believe that people should never divorce.
The Bible, I believe, says that it's okay to divorce in cases of adultery, and that's it. That would be the biblical position. But separation is justified in a few specific cases. Not divorce, but separation. So if he says that it's unacceptable even in cases of adultery, then it's just not biblical.
So then my question is, if someone is in a bad marriage,
Yes.
victim of abuse or emotional abuse, if not physical abuse, like under what grounds would it be okay for someone to leave a marriage?
None.
Well, like I said, I don't ever believe in divorce, so it wouldn't matter what scenario you dream up. But at the same time, if someone were genuinely like afraid of their physical safety, or there was some kind of a severe issue, like there may be a reason to separate temporarily just to try.
Right, that's separation. So the three reasons that Jehovah's Witnesses list, at least, for separation, not divorce, but separation, is physical abuse. You feel that you are in physical danger, or spiritual non-support. So you're not encouraging people to like go to church services or anything. And number 3 is physical non-support. So they're not, they're capable of working, but they're not working because they just don't feel like it, basically. Those are the 3 reasons for separation in Jehovah's Witnesses' minds.
Try and get away from that particular issue. Like if someone says like, hey, I'm worried that my husband is going to literally kill me or kill my children or hurt them. And so we went to my mom's house just to like, you know, be away from them. Like I'm not going to condemn that person for trying to potentially like stay away from abusive behavior.
But then go back?
Well, again, I do believe that wives should be subject to their husbands. So, you know, here's the thing. I totally condemn spousal abuse. I think it's wicked.
I wasn't suggesting
husbands
you
should
don't.
never do it. But here's the thing. I would encourage that wife to stay with her husband. Yes.
Let's take it down a notch. What if they just don't love each other? is it ever okay for those two people to separate, or are they doomed? Like, well, I made a mistake when I was
Yeah, the answer is no, it's never okay.
those two people to separate, or are they doomed? Like, well, I made a mistake when I was 19, got married to someone I thought I loved. Guess what? I was wrong. Is that okay? Because I think you said this recently, like men have it rough because women can just divorce you for any reason, no fault divorce.
My God, dude. Yeah, guess what? That can be flipped around. Women have it hard because men can divorce them anytime. What is wrong with these people?
It would be horrible if two people who loved each other got divorced. That's not what's happening. There are reasons. I don't have to know everyone's reasons. But if people get divorced, there's probably a reason behind it. And the fact that it's legal for people to get divorced without citing abuse or something like that, I see that as a step forward. Let people live their lives, do what makes them happy, because it's probably
But I don't believe that
kids.
divorce makes people happy. I think that it's
Well, you're simply wrong, good sir.
a misnomer and a lie.
Okay, does he know what a misnomer is? It's not a misnomer.
Additionally,
Look, just to be clear, define misnomer. Misnomer, a wrong or inaccurate name or designation. An example, nowadays, it's a misnomer to call a farmer a peasant. But back in the day, they used to be called peasants. But a peasant is also somebody who's destitute. Farmers aren't destitute. Farmers make a lot of money a lot of the time. The red panda is a misnomer. It's not a panda. While panda bears do share a genetic link to other bears in the Ursidae family, the red panda is instead the sole member of the Aluridae family. Oh, that's interesting. It's commonly believed that the red panda derived its name from the panda bear, but it's actually the other way around. Huh. Knowing is half the battle, as they say, right? Anyway, the point is that misnomers are things that are inaccurately named. Divorce would only be a misnomer if it had the word happy in it or something. Happy divorce. He doesn't even know what the word misnomer means. Okay, let's continue. Sorry, get sidetracked there.
Do what makes them happy, because it's probably
but I
better for
don't
the
believe
kids.
that divorce makes people happy. I think that it's a misnomer and a lie. Additionally, it causes destruction for many people. There's a lot of victims of divorce, in my opinion. But I've known people that had a really bad marriage, and they even said audibly, like, I don't love you anymore.
Yeah.
And I think they were being sincere. It wasn't just like having a random fight or something.
Right.
This was like a year period of time. And then I know now they've restored their marriage and they're
And it can
back
happen.
together. So just because people may be having a bad spot in their marriage and think that divorce is the right door to take, if that door was out of the equation, like it's not even an option, I think it would cause many more people to work on their marriage and resolve their issues and fix them, because
Yeah, look, the thing is, a lot of the time, if you're in like a bad spot in your relationship, not every time, but many times, at a certain point, there's no coming back from it. At a certain point, you cannot fix it. It's over. And you know when it's over, too. You know when it's gone to a point that it's just not fixable most of the time. So anyway, I don't really care if that fixes some marriages. It ruins even more lives.
marriage is two sinners. People are imperfect. Love is a thing that you have to work at. And so, if people have that mentality, I think people would be more careful who they choose to marry. They would treat it more carefully. And that
You're not allowed to sleep with somebody before marriage. That is automatically going to create an environment in which people are not careful about who they marry. I saw this with Jehovah's Witnesses. You can't sleep with someone before marriage, so kids get married at 18 years old every single time. That's when my brother got married. So my sister got married. So they get married at 18, and inevitably, every time their marriage falls apart, as Jehovah's Witnesses' marriages fall apart, I mean, not my siblings, because they didn't know who they were marrying. They didn't even know who they are, as a person. They don't know who. Forget knowing who their spouse is. Their spouse doesn't know who their spouse is. You've got a lot of growing to do when you're 18 years old, a lot. So the point is, there is no being careful about who you marry at 18 years old. You can't. It's just it's simply impossible.
marriages would generally be better overall because they wouldn't have this escape door.
And I think it's probably more people are prolonging when they get married these days, right? Like they're waiting.
afraid of divorce.
I don't even know
believe.
it's that, but it's I'm going to figure out what I want first, then get married, as opposed to
There you go.
marrying young when I'm still not settled in my own life and I don't necessarily know what I want. But I'm saying, like, if they're going into marriage later in life because they have a better sense of what they're looking for, that probably leads to a stronger marriage. But
Absolutely.
going back to your point of if they are getting divorced, they've probably decided there is no path forward to make this work. I see that, then that's a good reason to separate. And it's probably, if you know people whose parents have gotten divorced, like I've known plenty of people who said, yeah, my parents constantly at each other's throats. They did not love each other. And after they got divorced, everything was better for us as kids. Because guess what? Having those two people in the household was not better for us. It made our
Yeah, my parents should have gotten divorced, and my mom should have taken me away from my dad, like, at 12 years old. Honestly, she should have done that before I was even born.
life hell. And so going back to my question of like, is divorce okay? I think there are plenty of cases when it is. I don't think you guys believe that it's ever okay. And I'm trying to figure out, like, there are some cases when things are really bad. You're living in a bad
Yeah,
home.
but if divorce wasn't on the table, I think those people could have still reconciled and the family life could have.
Well, I don't care what you think. Like, you're wrong. Some people cannot reconcile, and you make people's lives miserable by imposing your will on them. Your will being, like, your desire to not allow marriage for anybody ever.
Been better.
But you know as well as I do, that doesn't always happen.
Sure. And I'm not saying that it does, but at the end of the day, divorce is devastating to both parties. It hurts both parties. It hurts children if there are children in the situation.
It can.
I think it does.
And it's more damaging to stay in the relationship by a mile and a half. It can. Yes, divorce hurts. It hurts way more to not get divorced.
Just period. Now, whether or not it dramatically affects them is, not always going to be the case. People can be strong. People can get over things. And obviously, if children are older, it's maybe less likely that it'll have a major impact. But at the same time, I think it's damaging to society. It's damaging to the institution of marriage. And I think that people should not be waiting to get married because they're usually committing a lot of sin in that.
See, this is fascinating to me. It's like, it's exactly the same as I want to lower the numbers of abortions that take place. You hear somebody say something like that. Personally, I want to raise the number of abortions. I think we should have more of it, but that's just me. Somebody like this guy says, I want to lower abortion rates, right? And there are ways to do that. You can do that in a society, in a demographic. You can lower abortion rates by spreading sex ed and birth control. But he wants to decrease birth control too and have abstinence-only sex ed. So what's he really trying to do here? It's very clearly not about abortion, right? Like, what's the goal? Why does he hold these mutually inconsistent ideals? It's the same kind of thing right here, like with what he's saying here. Not only do I think people should not get divorced ever, but I also think that they should get married as young as humanly possible. You can have one of those two things and have a healthy society, not both.
And I think that people should not be waiting to get married because they're usually committing a lot of sin in that waiting period. And they're bringing all this baggage into the relationships they have. And I think it's probably going to cause them to be more likely to even get divorced.
That sounds like you're saying jump into it before you know what you're jumping into.
Yes, that is what he's saying.
No, I think you should totally
No, it is. It is what he's saying.
get divorced.
That sounds like you're saying jump into it before you know what you're jumping into.
No, I think you should totally know the person and have confidence in who they are and,
How
and
can
have
you do that?
sincere feelings of love towards that
When
individual.
you're young and you
Well,
have
I got
not
married at
experienced-
21
Which is young.
and we're about to celebrate 15 years here in just a few days.
Yeah.
And we're great. We
And
have a
that's-
great marriage.
And that's wonderful. That's not the case for everybody.
Sure, but I think the reason why people struggle in their marriage is because they're not putting God first. They're not being selfless in their relationship. They're being very selfish, and I think unfortunately, selfish.
Okay, fine. They're not putting God first, and they're being selfish. Great. Now, as the recipient of this selfish behavior, how do I solve this without a divorce? This person is absolutely refusing to work with me on anything at all, and they're selfish as it gets. I want to fix it. Now, how do I fix this? Sometimes it's simply not fixable. Sometimes the other person doesn't want to fix it, and it's doomed to fail. That is just how it works. This guy can't, like, get a grip on that, or doesn't care.
Fish people think getting divorced will fix it, when many times it's not the case. We see the divorce rate increase, actually. If someone gets divorced, they're actually more likely to get divorced again when they get married. They have a higher chance of getting
Okay, I don't even know if that's true, but whatever.
divorced. So if divorce was a positive decision, I would think we would see the inverse. I think we would see people getting divorced, and then the next time around, they're like, oh, now I know what I want. Now I have a better sense of who I should be married to and what I gel with. But we actually see an opposite effect of individuals who get divorced,
Get more
statistically, generally speaking, have that happen. And
I don't know why.
Check it out. So the bike disappears when you talk to this little Korok guy. It was attached to it, and the bike just appeared in midair right here and then fell after I talked to him. That's super fascinating. The bike was right here, and it ended up way over there. That's really interesting. Sorry. A little distraction there.
Get more
statistically, generally speaking, have that happen. And
I don't know why that's worse than like a couple that doesn't love each other or fights constantly who stay married for 50 years or something. I don't get why longevity is like the pinnacle of success there, as opposed to, all right, you got divorced 3 times, but
they're
happy.
probably going to argue with anybody. People argue. Marriage is ugly. Marriage has.
Okay, this isn't like, no, marriage shouldn't be ugly. Are you kidding me with this? If this guy is sitting here saying that marriage is ugly, he probably shouldn't be married to his wife.
Low spots, it has high spots. And marriage is, an institution where you choose to love someone regardless of their faults. That's what true love is. And so the picture of marriage is
true love, loving someone regardless of their faults. Okay.
saying, I will unconditionally love you till death do us part. And that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to see someone that will be willing to love you even with all your faults, even no matter what sins or what problems you have. That's a beautiful thing. And it's being destroyed by this ejection seat called divorce today, where someone says, I don't think you're treating me well enough, or I don't like you enough. And it shows they don't genuinely have love in their heart towards that individual.
That's simply false. People can have love in their heart toward another individual. Love is not something you choose or that you can force. It's something that simply exists, and from time to time, it disappears. Sometimes people just stop. There's nothing they can do. It's not intentional. It just comes to an end.
Hosea in the Bible was commanded to stay married to an adulterous woman, which for most men, that's probably the worst thing that the wife could do. And I personally think
What about for most women? Is that the worst thing that a man could do to a woman?
that as well. But Hosea stayed with her and was a faithful husband and loved her. And so that's a beautiful picture of how Christ loves us, even though we are very sinful and transgress against him continually, that he loves us, and you could never lose your salvation.
That sounds very nice. My concern is if someone in your church or your kids or something like that came to you and said, this is a bad marriage, for whatever the reason is, the option is, yeah, but leaving that bad marriage is not an option in your view for those people. And that to me contributes to down the road. Maybe
I think most
more
kids,
abuse.
if not all kids, want their parents to stay together. And most people that I know.
No, that's completely wrong. My parents should not have stayed together. They should not have stayed together. Bottom line. It was about as damaging to everybody's psyche as it could possibly be for my parents to stay together.
Know that their parents did get divorced. They've told me that they wish their parents had stayed together. I'm not saying there couldn't be an exception to that. I'm not saying
I could tell you the exact opposite.
Sure, I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but most of the time, from my experience, it's that kids wish their parents were together. I've seen the devastation of a lot of children and their attitudes changing, having behavioral issues after their.
Well, the devastation isn't the result of the divorce. The devastation is the result of the parents being absolutely terrible and insufferable and difficult. Like, my devastation from when I was little wasn't because my parents separated. It's because my dad was fucking terrible. I don't know what this guy, what is he drinking that he gets to the point where he believes this or that he's come to these conclusions? This is nonsensical garbage. Does not represent reality at all.
Their parents get divorced. My mother was a child psychologist and therapist,
She was? Wow. Okay.
and she dealt with a lot of children that had, unfortunately, very rough home lives, and divorce was often in that scenario. It's very, if we could get all the statistics and all the proper data, I think we would show that even carnally speaking, there's a negative impact. But even if that,
Like, divorce was in the scenario in bad home lives, not because of the divorce. It was not a direct result of the divorce. The divorce is a result of the bad home life. The guy doesn't seem to understand the difference between like correlation and causation.
that wasn't true, the Bible's clear. Jesus said, what God has joined together, let not man put asunder. And that's what I believe. So I think that there's carnal reasons, but ultimately I appeal to Scripture, and I think that Jesus wants marriage to be till death do us
He
part.
says he hated the putting away.
Yeah.
He hates it.
And I'm saying that
he
leads to
wants
bad
us-
results. I'm sure he wants it.
Well, no,
I'm sure you want it.
The quote that you were talking about is where I'm upset about no-fault divorces.
Yeah.
Here's what happens. The women or whoever can just say, I want to divorce you because you're ugly, or
Sure.
I don't like you, your breast stinks, or whatever.
Yeah.
No fault. But what happens is the woman always gets custody or split custody, but in general, the woman gets the custody or alimony or child support in most.
Okay, now this is a completely different subject. If you want to erase child support and alimony and child custody problems and whatever, fine. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody splitting up because they're in a terrible situation with a terrible person. The court systems tend to favor the mother in most situations. I lived in West Virginia for like years, and my uncle, my adopted uncle, like my kid's uncle, it's my ex's uncle technically. He had a kid with a woman, and this woman was terrible. Her name's Amy, and I was really, really close friend, like best friends with Amy's ex, not my kid's uncle Chris, but Amy's other ex, Brian, like before Chris. And every time Brian came over and we'd sit there, we'd play Smash Bros. And we would just talk shit about Amy for like the whole time. Oh my God. She was just terrible. Everything about her is terrible. She had a bad habit of taking a bunch of Klonopin or whatever, Xanax or whatever, and blacking out because she took so much. And then going to Walmart, where her mom was the general manager, and just stealing shit. Like Kit Kat bars, shower curtains, whatever. And then she says, she gets in trouble for it. Her mom, she feels obligated. She's got to call the cops, and she's got to do a report and everything. Somebody stole merchandise, so she does it. And Amy apologizes, and it's petty larceny. It's under $500. It was just like most cases, they just give her a slap on the wrist and send her about her day. This is the kind of thing where like a 10-year-old steals a Kit Kat bar and they just return it and apologize and it's over. But then she did it again. Number 2. She did it twice. And then a third time, and a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth. I'm not even joking. She had 9 felonies. 9 felonies. After a certain point, over $500 is felony. Under $500 is petty larceny. It's a misdemeanor. At a certain point, it becomes a felony, even if it's under $500. So she kept getting arrested for stealing shit, and she didn't even need anything. Chris made plenty of money. He's like a general manager at Logan's Roadhouse and made enough. It was like $60,000 a year or something. That's really good in West Virginia. He was just fine. She didn't want for anything. But she could not stop herself from stealing shit. God, she's just the worst. The absolute literal worst. And man, I really miss those days of sitting with Brian talking shit about her constantly. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. She's in a documentary. She did so many drugs. Oh my God. She's in a documentary on Netflix about drug use in West Virginia. That's how much... She's just a mess, dude. And Chris didn't do any drugs at all. He only ever got home and he drank a case of beer every single night since he's 18 years old. That's just how he always did things. Case of beer every night. 20 beers. Anyway, her kids saw her get arrested over and over and over again. The cops show up to her house put her in handcuffs, and her kids would stand out in the yard. And I remember, pulling up one time. She's getting in a cop car at her house. And I walk up to the kid. I say, "What's going on?" He says, "Mom's getting arrested again." And just went inside. That was it. It was so commonplace. She was a mess, a complete mess. She had no right to take care of children. She had no place to take care of kids under any circumstance. She was such a mess. Chris was a good guy. He took care of his family, he took care of his kids, took care of everybody. He made them food when Amy was all fucked up on Xanax and had no idea what was happening. And they got divorced because she cheated on him. And when she cheated on him and they were going through this divorce proceeding, she gave herself a red mark and called the cops before she even got home. And the cops showed up and they saw a red mark on her face. And she claimed Chris hit her. Chris has never hit anybody or anything in his entire life. He's the tamest, most chill person on planet Earth. He is so... I've never seen him get angry before in my life, ever. He doesn't get angry. He gets disappointed at people. He gets sad. He doesn't get angry. And if the cops had known Chris at all, they would know that she was completely full of shit. If they just looked at her criminal record, they would know that she was full of shit. But they arrested Chris for that. Charges were eventually dropped when it, was pretty obvious that she lied about it. The charges were dropped and it came off his record and everything. But they get divorced and the kids go to Chris's custody. Like, he gets full custody, but she gets visitation for half the week. So he keeps the kids for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. She gets them for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, basically. And he pays child support to her. Why is he paying child support to Amy? She doesn't even have full custody. She has zero custody. He's the primary. They go to school in his district. Why is he paying child support to Amy? This actively drug addicted, like, not to knock drug addicts, because I was a drug addict too for years. Actively drug addicted person who can't help herself but to steal shit from places constantly and get arrested nonstop. Chris never been arrested in his life except for that one time when it was dropped. And she gets child support? Are you kidding me? Anyway, the point is that court systems heavily favor women, like a lot, particularly in West Virginia. It's a problem. It's unacceptable. And if that's an issue that you want to, like, take on, if this is something that you want to fight, if this is a battle you want to adopt, do it. That's wrong. Some of the shit that happens is wrong. But that's not the battle he's taking on here. This guy that we're listening to right now, he's not complaining about women getting custody more often than not. He's complaining that women are allowed to leave their husbands at all. Anyway, there's something here, but he's equivocating and twisting it around and turning it into something that it's not. Bottom line. Anyway, his poor liver, yeah. He and his dad, Charlie, both, a case of beer per night each. 20 beers per night each. Every night. They weren't violent. They weren't angry. The moment the first beer opened, even if they didn't take a sip, they would never get in their car. They'd throw their keys on the dresser and they'd never touch them again. But they drank a case of beer per night each. And Charlie, I mean, they're both still alive. Charlie's 85 and he's still drinking a case of beer per night and smoking unfiltered Camel cigarettes, a pack a day. This dude has genetics like nobody's business. My God, dude, I wish I had genetics like that. Anyway, yeah, the point is that, like, sometimes people are mistreated. Sometimes people are taken advantage of. Sometimes court systems do the wrong thing. But he's not even arguing to change that. He's arguing that women shouldn't be allowed to, like, divorce their husbands at all. That's the point. Imagine the calories, right? Secret to a long life, yeah. Case of beer per night, unfiltered Camel cigarettes. 85 years old, man. My God, that's crazy. I wrote about him in my book, too, about how much he drank and stuff. Anyway, hard respect for both of those people, honestly. Both Chris and Charlie. And Sue. Rest in peace, Sue. She died September 22nd, I believe, 2022. Anyway, all right, let's keep listening to these poor fools. I honestly miss sitting there with Brian talking shit about Amy. It was so entertaining.
those cases, 92, it's a huge percentage of the wife, the former wife, getting custody. And so then the husband's screwed. He's got child support he has to pay for the rest until they're all 18 years old or even into college if they go to college.
Well, here's the thing about, like, I just told the story about child support and all that stuff. So let me just clarify my position on this. If you have a kid, you should support that kid. If you don't have custody of the kid, somebody else takes care of them and pays the bills for them and everything, you should contribute to that. I raised my kid on my own, just me. But morally, I'd say that I would be entitled to child support. Although I don't even bother trying to get it from the mom because the mom doesn't have the money, and I have plenty to take care of the kids. So morally, I'm entitled to child support. People are entitled to it if they have a kid. Alimony, not so much. Alimony shouldn't exist, honestly, at all, ever. I think alimony is bullshit. But child support is a moral obligation.
College, and then it just destroys them.
If
it destroys their lives.
Okay, I don't know the stats off the top of my head. If there was more parity in the child support alimony stuff, like, so it wasn't screwing over one side, but you would still be against it, though. Like, well,
yeah, that's not the point. It has nothing to do with alimony or anything. He's just using this as like an easy complaint against divorce.
It's because Jesus is against it, and so we have to appeal to Scripture.
but you've heard.
See how he just stepped back? Started out as giving us this reason for why he doesn't like it, and now he's moved back to another position entirely.
I respect
in a perfect
the fact
world. Yeah, I mean,
the Southern
should
Baptists
work.
right now going through a huge thing because there's so many pastors who have said over and over, no, stay with your abusive husband. It'll get better. He's coming to church now. Like, and they just end up staying in these bad marriages when it's like, let
If there's
this
violence or
person-
sexual abuse, I think that they should leave and not get divorced. But that's
Yeah, separation. I mean, that's just like the biblical position.
I don't
what
know why
I
that's
personally
better.
believe. Well, I mean, what's divorcing going to help?
They can move on with their lives.
I mean, divorcing is not going to help the situation,
Dude, are you serious? Is this a joke?
is it?
It 100% will help.
How?
What's the alternative? Separating but
Yeah,
not
you
divorcing?
just separate and not divorce.
I mean,
That's what
again,
the Bible teaches in 1 Corinthians chapter 7.
I've heard advice, and I agree with this, that pastors would say, try to work on treating your husband better. And there's been cases.
The husband, oh my God, it's the wife's fault. The wife needs to treat the husband better. That's the problem. Are you hearing this?
This is where the women did try to be a better wife despite the horrible circumstances they're under, and it did change their marriage, and it did get better. So I would encourage them to continue doing so until death do us part. I mean,
There was some Southern Baptists.
You make vows.
I
for a
don't
reason.
think that men out there are just beating up a Proverbs 31 woman. I mean,
Okay, well, you're simply wrong. There are a lot of men beating up a Proverbs 31 woman, whatever Proverbs 31 means. I assume he means the perfect woman when he says that. For all intents and purposes, my mom was the perfect biblical wife. She did everything the Bible expected of her because the Bible expected it. Simple as that. She wouldn't have been like that if it hadn't been, if she hadn't been such a religious nutcase. And my dad was still a sack of shit, despite that fact. So you're wrong. And out of a country of 330 million people, there is going to be a pretty high number of people, statistically, who do act like that.
according to the Bible, the Proverbs 31 woman is just like going out of her way to make all the meals, be so polite, never nagging, just like always at the house, just taking care of everything. Like, I just don't think that's happening. So I think that women could prevent themselves from a lot of physical abuse in that scenario.
No. There are plenty of women who are like, I've done everything. That's not why abuse happens, because she's obedient. Like,
right. It's because it's usually because of a power thing, and because the guy has limited self-control. Abuse is the abuser's fault, not the abuse victim's fault, every single time.
and that's the wrong way to think about it.
Disobedient, you mean?
Yeah, because she's disobedient, so that's not why it happens. But again, what would it take to change your mind on that? Like, do you need to hear from a woman who has been beaten up even though she was a submissive, obedient
sometimes
wife?
we talk about these things in a vacuum. Obviously, if a man was being abusive to his family, like there should probably be some crime or punishment for that individual, and that person should be held accountable for their actions, right? Like we
But
can't
if he's
just
not doing something illegal per se.
yeah.
That
I mean,
that's how it happens most of the time. Like, they're not physically abusing him to the point that you've committed a crime or anything. But let's just stick with like emotionally abusive. I don't love you. We're not happy together. To me, that's like, okay, well, go be happy. Your kids are better off when you're both happy. So go separate.
well,
Go
hey,
get divorced.
Abigail in the Bible had a bad marriage, and you know what? She literally prayed that her husband would die, and she like cursed him, and God killed him.
How does it always come back to death with you people?
I know. Why is it always about death with them? And also, you think that God is going to force this person to die? You're going to set up a scenario where this person dies if you pray for it enough? How did they get here in their lives? How did they come to these conclusions? This is nuts. Quick interjection. This won't take long, I promise. I just want to say I'd appreciate it if you check my Patreon. OwenMorgan.com/Patreon to find it. YouTube's algorithm goes up and down, so I can never predict where it's going to be. Having patrons gives me some level of stability. Okay, back to the video.